Hello students, welcome to this new session of Python. The last session we had studied about the difference between number of things, but the main thing that we studied towards the end was contrast between a simple problem and a complex problem. Now our basic goal is to separate out the two different colored dots, the red colored dots and the green colored dots. But in doing so, sometimes, as you can observe over here, a linear model is used to fit the sample data, which may give a good result. But sometimes a group of non-linear models, ensemble means group of models, that means not a single model to solve the problem, multiple models to solve the problem may be required when the problem is complex. Specifically, there are number of different opinions by different authors, but in general, when the number of columns are more, then it is termed as a complex problem. When the number of columns or attributes are less, it is referred to as a simple problem. In today's session, we are going to continue with little bit of what we had studied in the last session about simple problem and complex problem, but we also are going to learn number of new things. We start off with factors that drive predictive algorithm performance. We use different algorithms to predict the outcome of the target variable. Now, which factors are responsible for improving the efficiency, or based on which factors will the outcome of the predictive algorithms depend on? Yes, basically like what we were studying in the last session, we continue with there. The main two factors that are there are the volume of data and the number of attributes in the data. Remember, more the volume, better it is to train the model, specifically in case of complex problems. If the number of columns are more than the number of rows, then it becomes difficult to train the model. Fine, let's try to go ahead and try to check it out. The results explain the excitement over large volumes of data. Accurate predictions for complicated problems require large volume of data. That is what I said before a while. In the sense, more the number of rows, more the number of records, more the data, larger the volume of the data, we can train the algorithm or train the model in a much better way, which generally results into a much better solution. Yes, adding a column means adding a new attribute. Now always remember that when you add columns to your existing data, then you are increasing the complexity of the data because the number of variables are increasing. Just try to observe this equations over here. Yi equivalent to xi star beta. Now here we assume that there is only one column equals to what? xi1 star beta 2 plus xi2 star beta 2 plus xim star beta m. That means, yes, this is a linear relationship between attributes and outcomes. This is the dependent variable, these are the independent variables. Xi's are independent variables, yi is dependent variable. As the number of independent variables increase, that means the number of attributes increase, and that increases the complexity of the data. Of course, adding new row means getting an additional historical example of the existing attributes, and that always helps in making a better accuracy. Now just let us try to study some terms, specifically degree of freedom and aspect ratio. When you add a column to the matrix of attribute, adds another coefficient that needs to be determined. This added coefficient is called degree of freedom. Let's go back. Now, when you are adding an attribute, that means you are adding one more xi value. Now, when you add xi value, definitely it has to be accompanied by some beta value, which is some constant. So, that is what is said over here. Adding a column to the matrix of attributes adds another coefficient that needs to be determined. That means we need to identify the value of beta. This added coefficient is called degree of freedom. Just some terminology. Adding another degree of freedom is making model more complicated. That is what in short is said over here. In the sense, always remember that fewer the number of columns, better the accuracy, and it may be a linear model, but as the number of columns keep on increasing, more the complexity, and we may need more than one complex models, ensembler models. Yes, in this case, as the number of attributes increase, generally the number of examples that are taken to train the data should also increase. Now we come across another term, that is aspect ratio. What is aspect ratio? Ratio of rows to columns. That means, say for example, you have we saw a rock and mine database, and we had studied few other data sets as well. The total number of rows, say for example, let us try to check it up. Windows E. Just a second, let me open one of the data sets, and we'll come to know. Okay, we open this Sonar dataset 1, which is rock and mine dataset. Now just try to observe over here, the total number of records are just 208. If I am not wrong, and if I remember, yes, 209, but the first is the column heading. So 208 rows. But if you try to observe the number of columns that are there, it is quite high, 61 columns. That means the aspect ratio that we are talking about here, the ratio of rows to the columns, 208 is to the number of columns, that is 61, which is quite high. Almost you can think in terms of 3.5 is to 1, which is high. And over here the requirement may be there that the number of records may be increased, so it becomes easier to train the model, or rather, to put it in different terms, the trained model gives more accurate output. But two terms, degree of freedom and aspect ratio. Degree of freedom means when we add an attribute, say for example xi, we add some constant which is beta, and that is known as degree of freedom. This added coefficient is called degree of freedom. Aspect ratio, the ratio of number of rows to number of columns. Now let us take some examples as to, and that will give us little bit more of an idea about what we discussed in the previous slide. All the data sets are different, and different data sets, say for example, this is one data set. Now let us try to check the Abelon data set, which again we had used. Now if you try to observe this Abelon data set, how many columns are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hardly 9 columns of data is there, and the number of rows are quite significant compared to the number of columns. If we try to go down, let's try to check. almost you can think of 4000 records. 4000 compared to 8 or 9. So that makes the aspect ratio much higher. In the sense, what again we need to think about is every problem is different. Every problem has different number of records and different number of columns. But better the aspect ratio, it becomes easier to uh, do some prediction. That means train the data, build a model, and then make some prediction. We just take two examples, biological data sets and natural language processing data sets, where the number of columns are many more compared to the number of rows. Say for example, in biological genomic data sets easily contain 10,000 to 50,000 attributes. Now, if there are 50,000 attributes, that means even if we want the aspect ratio that we have in the rock is to mine data set, then we need at least 2 lakh records, and each record is the data of one experiment, and this cost is quite high sometimes. Even with tens of thousands of individual experiments, a genomic data set may not be enough to train a complex ensembable model. Why it may not be enough? Because you have 50,000 attributes, but if you have only 1 lakh records, that means the aspect ratio is 2. Then it becomes difficult to train the model. Yes, in this case, a linear model may give equivalent or better performance. That means the prediction accuracy of a linear model may be better than that of a complex. But as I said, genomic data are expensive, in the sense to carry out one experiment and to get one record of data may be too expensive sometimes. Now we consider the example of natural language processing. Natural language processing, just to give you an example, say for example, when you are writing your mails in Gmail, what happens? The common sentences are automatically filled up, written up. This is just a small example of natural language processing. There can be many other examples of natural language processing. But what happens in case of natural language processing? When we create a matrix or attribute like this, yi is the target variable, or the dependent variable xi's are the independent variable. This matrix entries in the matrix of attributes are number of times a word appears in the document. So depending upon the problem and depending upon how we are solving the problem, the attributes are words and rows are the documents. This makes the problem very much complicated. In the sense, the number of columns is the vocabulary size for a document collection. Think of it, how big it will be. Depending on pre-processing, the vocabulary can be from a few thousand to a few tens of thousands. Just try to think of the number of columns that can be there over here, and if the number of columns increases, definitely the complexity of the problem increases and it becomes difficult to train the model. The attribute matrix for the text becomes very wide when n-grams are counted alongside words. Now what is this n-grams? Let us try to take one example, then we will come back to the previous slide. We take one simple sentence, the cow jumps over the moon. Now n-grams is a general term. If we take n is equal to 2 like we have taken over here, just 1 minute, like n is equal to 2 over here, That means it is bigrams. Then what would be the possible values? The first two words, the cow, then the next two words, cow jumps over the moon, and so on. So the number of combinations that we get over here for a small sentence is also large. So think of if the text is quite large. The attribute matrix for the text becomes very wide when n-grams are counted alongside words. N-grams are group of 2, 3 or 4 words that appear next to one another. Whenever we want to auto-complete the text, this n-gram technique is generally or can be used, is one of the ways. What we want the combination of 2 words, 3 words, 4 words, 5 words, and we want to predict the last word in the combination. So for that, yes, we have to prepare a matrix, and more the n-grams, the group of words, more the number of attributes in the matrix and more complicated the problem. When the group of 2, 3 or 4 words are also counted, the attribute space for NLP can grow to more than 1,000,000 attributes. It is really a fact, because you start from bigram, 2 gram, 3 gram, 4 gram, 5 gram, and so on. In a long text document, this can grow beyond our imagination. So once again, in this case also, the linear model may give equivalent or better performance than a complicated ensemble model. Now ensemble model basically is a group of models and group of complex models. So even to train data with one complex model takes a lot of time. Compared to that, if you train the data linearly, it will take less time and the output may be almost equivalent. In statistics or machine learning, ensemble methods use multiple learning algorithms to obtain better predictive performance. That means linear model uses just one linear equation. This uses multiple equations to obtain the predictive performance and could be obtained from any of the learning algorithms alone. So when are linear models preferable and when are non-linear models preferable? Linear models are preferable when the data set has more columns than rows, or when the underlying problem is simple. Non-linear are preferable for complex problems with many more rows than the columns of data. So again the aspect ratio comes over here, many more rows than the columns of data. That means the aspect ratio is higher over here, the aspect ratio is lower over here in the first case. An additional factor is definitely the training time. Remember, to train a linear model, it may not take that much of time, but to train a non-linear model, it may take a significant amount of time. Now we were over here, ensemble methods. Basically what it shows is more than one methods use multiple learning algorithms. That means more than one methods to train the data, and definitely it is going to take much more time compared to the linear model. Training a number of different models of different complexity. Now, so this were basically the factors that drive the performance of predictive algorithms. So again we try to discuss it out. Two main things, the number of attributes in the data and the number of records in the data. Remember, it is always for a good predictive model, the number of rows, if they are higher, it is always better, and the number of columns, if they are lower, it is always better. Now, once we have got the data, we have got the algorithm, a model is built. How can we say that a particular model which is trained on a training data is good enough or not good enough? How to judge that? So again here it depends on the type of input data, whether it is based on classification or whether it is based on regression. Let us just try to check the points that are given over here, then we go through that. The first one is the difference matrix that you can use for different type of problem, difference matrix. The second area consists of techniques for gathering out of sample error estimates. Clearly, the first one refers to the regression problem, the second one refers to the classification problem. Let us try to go further and try to understand it. Now, this clearly mean standard error, mean absolute error, and root mean squared error. These are examples of regression problem. Remember over here, because target and prediction are real numbers. Say for example, let us go to the equation over here, yi equals to x1i something 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 like this, where if yi is a real number and xi's are also real numbers, then in this case over here we calculate mean standard error, mean absolute error, root mean squared error, and these are just statistical measures which most of you have studied or should have studied in your high school. Yi minus yi cap, actual value minus the predicted value, and you are taking the summation RMSE under root of summation, whereas here you are squaring it, here you are taking the absolute value. So just little bit of difference, but the fundamental rule remains the same. So for regression problem you have different calculations. Now, based on the values that you get, you can make number of different conclusions, but again this is dependent on the problem under study and the data that is available to you. But some general observations: if the mean squared error of the prediction error is roughly the same as the target variance, MSE of the prediction error is roughly the same as the target variance, the prediction algorithm is not performing well. Here you can introspect and you can try to retrain the model and try to find out the prediction once again. You could replace prediction algorithm with a simple calculation of the mean of the targets and perform as well. Now this is one possible solution that is given, but in short, if MSE of the dependent variable is the same as the variance of the independent variable, then definitely the model is not performing well. Errors may be useful for analyzing sources and magnitude of error, to look at things like histogram, degree of normality, and so forth. That means basically these values indicate number of things, and we can try to identify the error or the magnitude of error. That means how big the error is. Sometimes the investigation will yield insights into error sources and potential performance improvement. In the sense, if we are able to find the error source, definitely we can improve the performance. If we are not able to identify the error source, we cannot improve the performance. Now the previous one was the case of regression problem. Now we go to performance measure in case of classification problem, where you have data in terms of labels. Say for example grade A, B, C or something like that, clicking on the ad yes or no. So when you have such data, then you have to perform classification. You cannot perform regression, in the sense the attributes are not real numbers, they have some label values. The approach to classification problems generally resolved around misclassification rates. What is the meaning of misclassification rate? The fraction of examples that are incorrectly classified. Maybe actually the user has clicked on the ad, but the prediction is that the user has not clicked. That means it is misclassification. Generally, algorithms for doing classification can present prediction in the form of probability. We have something known as a confusion matrix. Just let us try to go over here. Let me explain to you the confusion matrix. Specifically, this is used when there is a classification problem, when the dependent and independent variables are not real numbers but they are labels. Here we are considering a typical example. We are checking whether on a web page there are multiple advertisements given. So whether the user has clicked on the advertisement or the user has not clicked on the advertisement. Now we are taking two values, positive and negative, for both actual and predicted class. This is the actual class, this is the predicted class. Now what is the meaning of actual class and what is the meaning of predicted class? Actual class is what has actually happened, what the user has actually done, and prediction or predicted class is the result obtained after training, after the algorithm working on the training data, creating a model and giving some results. So if the actual and predicted values are both correct, that means it is true positive, then we don't have to worry. But basically we have to worry about false positive and false negative. Now what is true negative? When the actual value is no and the predicted value is also no, then it becomes true negative. Let us try to understand the meaning. First we try to understand true positive and we try to understand true negative. True positive means both are yes. Say for example this one. Okay, let me clear the options. Yes, fine, let me clear it again. Okay, so we are talking about true positive over here and we are talking about true negative over here. What is true positive and true negative? True positive means when it's actually yes, how often does it predict yes? So it tries to say that how often does it predict that the user has clicked on the ad when the user has actually clicked on the ad. Once again, when it is actually yes, how often does it predict yes? That is what it should be doing. Or when it is actually no, how often does it predict no? In the sense, the user has not clicked on the advertisement, how often does it predict no, that the user has not clicked on the advertisement? Ideally, the result should be either true positive or true negative. That is the best that you can get. the two corners that you have, true positive and true negative. Of course, here the numbers are quite high, specifically true negative, but as far as the result is true positive or true negative, there is no problem. Now, what is this false positive and what is this false negative? False negative, sorry, false positive means actually it is no, but the predicted value is true. We check false positive when it is actually no. How often does it predict yes? It is actually no, negative, but how often does it predict yes? That is what is referred to as false positive, and this is also referred to as type 1 error. What is type 2 error? The opposite of false positive, that is false negative. What is false negative? Actually it is positive or yes, but the predicted value is negative or no. That is what is false negative. When it is actually yes, how often it predicts no? Actually it is yes, but how often it predicts no? That means the user has actually clicked on the advertisement, but the prediction done is, it is saying that the user has not clicked on the advertisement. This is false negative. I repeat once again, what is false positive and what is false negative. False negative means actually it has predicted that the user has clicked on the advertisement when the user has not clicked on the advertisement. And false positive, it actually the user has not clicked on the advertisement, but it has been predicted that the user has clicked on the advertisement. So if you are able to separate out false positive and false negative, that actually gives some kind of a misclassification rate. And remember, the lower the values of false positive and false negative, the better the accuracy of your prediction. So we go back to where we were. In the prediction of click or not click is given as a probability, say 80% chance of click. The data scientist has the option to use 50% as a threshold value for representing the link or not presenting the link. That means what basically we are trying to do, there is a web page. On that, whether we should place an advertisement or not, it is meaningful to keep an advertisement on the web page only if more users are going to click on it, and less users are not going to click on it. So what the decision maker does, if there is an 80% chance of yes, there is an 80% chance of yes, true positive is 80%, then the decision maker may think of placing an ad on the web page. So this is what we are trying to do. The numbers in the contingency table represent the performance based on the choice for the threshold value. Yes, here the threshold value also becomes important, but it totally depends on the mindset of the decision maker. Now this is referred to as confusion matrix, or it is also referred to as contingency table. Both the terms are used number of times, either confusion matrix or contingency table. Yes, here total of 135 tests are conducted and the results are summarized. The matrix has two columns representing the possible predictions. It also has two rows representing the truth for each example. definitely if you see over here two rows representing the truth for each example, positive and positive. The two classification portrayed in are click and not click, appropriate for selecting and add. Now again, what should be the best value of threshold? 80%, 70%? Sometimes there are other factors also which determine whether to place a link for the advertisement or not. Now, what are these factors? The cost that is associated behind false positive or false negative. There's more cost associated with one type of error than with the other type of error. Basically, false positive and false negative are both kind of errors, but with which error more cost is associated, that needs to be checked out, and accordingly the threshold value or the decision for selecting the threshold value may be taken. We consider the sonar database where we want to identify whether under the water there is a rock or there is a mine. Definitely, what it says is that if a diver has to check it manually, then it costs $100 to be paid to the diver. But if an unexploded mine blasts, then it costs $1,000 in expected injuries and property damages if not removed. So we say that the cost for false positive is $100, the cost of false negative is $1,000. Definitely we need to first address false negatives because the cost is much higher. So many times deciding the threshold is not easy. It depends on the example, which example we are discussing and how we are going further. So, but in short, we want to minimize false positives and false negatives. Now, there are different kinds of problem, and for different kinds of problem, we have different kind of solutions which are available, and based on it we can make some decisions. A common technique is known as receiver operating characteristic. Remember, ROC is an important abbreviation. In one of the exams it was asked what is the full form of ROC curve. Basically, we try to observe this graph over here. This is what the curve is, and most of the area is below the ROC curve. Now, when most of the area is below the ROC curve, it is actually good. Most of the samples are within the ROC curve, which means the prediction is actually going to be much better. Let us continue with the ROC curve and other things. Now, how this name of the ROC curve came? Basically, from one of the practical examples, you might have heard the term radar, receiver to determine the presence or absence of hostile aircraft. Generally, radars are used by the military. It is one kind of a receiver which receives the signal if the aircraft of the enemy is there or not. So basically this ROC curve had evolved from this particular example. Yes, it yields a single plot that summarizes all of the different contingency tables. That is basically we are interested in identifying false positive and false negative. Now the ROC curve plots true positive rate versus the false positive rate. Now what is true positive rate and what is false positive rate? TPR is equal to TP upon TP plus Fn, and FPR is equal to FP upon Tn plus FP. So basically when such a graph is drawn, we come to know whether most of the points are under the curve, and accordingly the decision can be made. TPR is the proportion of positive examples that are correctly classified as positive, and FPR is the number of false positives relative to the total number of actual negatives, and we don't want this. As a simple thought experiment, consider using an extremely low value for decision threshold. If we have low value for decision threshold, the example is predicted as positive. Yes, but then there may be other problems as well. Now, if this represents the 50%, generally the ROC should be above this. If the ROC is below 50%, that means there is some problem in conducting the experiment. Basically this ROC is for out of sample data, and generally the ROC is from 1 to 1. That means on x-axis you have maximum value 1, on y-axis you have maximum value 1. Here you have true positive rate, here you have false positive rate. This curve is good, but the first one is considered to be still better because most of the region comes under the ROC curve. The more the region comes under the ROC curve, better is the better is said to be the prediction. The ROC curve for the classifier that operates by randomly deciding rock or mine forms a diagonal line from the lower left corner to the upper right corner. The lower left to the upper right. Now this specifically is an example of sonar data set, that is the rock versus the mine data set. So yes, for a perfect classifier the ROC curve steps straight up from 0 0 to 0 1 and then goes straight across to 1 1. That means if it goes from 0 to 1 and then to 1 1, that is the perfect. That means all the points are under the curve and that is the best result to get. But very rarely do we have such perfect ROCs. If the ROC curve drops significantly below the diagonal line, it usually means that the data scientist has got a sign switch somewhere and should examine his code carefully. That means the ROC curve is above this dotted line. If it comes somewhere below the dotted line, that means the data scientist has made some mistake in the algorithm or in the predictive model, and introspection must be done and correction must be done. So we have studied number of things today: ROC, then the performance measure for different type of problems, MAC, MAE and RMSE for regression problem, whereas confusion matrix for classification type of problem. We started with the factors that drive predictive algorithm performance, and definitely two main factors: the number of rows in the data set and the number of columns in the data set. So today we have studied number of points. We'll still try to continue further with this particular theoretical part. Remember, we can always draw the ROC curve or maybe other graphs, but right now we are just focusing on the theoretical part. So we stop over here. Thank you.